Howdy, everyone, and welcome to the first live stream of 2022. Can you believe it? It's 2022. It's kind of crazy. My name is Ariel, and if you know me, well, I guess that's why you're here, maybe. If you don't know me, I'm going to tell you more about me in just a little bit. For now, as per tradition, tell me what you're drinking. What's in your cup? Is it coffee? Is it tea? I have some Earl Grey tea. Kind of my favorite. Actually, no, this is not Earl Grey. I ran out of Earl Grey. This is English breakfast. Almost the same, a little bit more harsh. Join the chat. Tell us what's going on. And tell us where you're from. I'm streaming from New York City. No sound. That could be a problem. Starting the year with technical difficulties. Now, I think we're good. No technical difficulties. I have coffee too because I just didn't finish my espresso this morning. It's been a busy morning. But I'm going to go for tea. Tea is the better option for me right now. Loud and clear. Thank you for confirming. Let's see what we got. Sparkling water. That's good. Uganda. That's kind of far. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is where all my comments are, so if I'm looking in this direction, that's why. Coffee in Chicago? That sounds like the name of a movie. Coffee in Chicago. I can see that. Coffee in Idaho? A lot of coffees out there. Well, it's good. I should probably finish mine. Slowly but surely. First cup of coffee of the day. Let's see, and I'm getting reports that my audio is only coming out of one ear. So definitely a good way to start 2022 with technical difficulties. But I really mean it, because we get it out of the way, and then the next live stream is not going to have them. This is only my second live stream, so we're getting going here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that was the technical difficulty from before. Now we just have to figure out how to get it out of both ears, and everything will be fine. Let's see. Still one ear. Two ears? I'm getting a ton of conflicting reports. Ooh, iced coffee in Spain. That sounds like a good combination. Oh, and I think we got audio out of both ears now. Happy New ASO year to you as well. You know, so since the last live stream, I've developed a new superpower. Let's see if it works. And now I can do this. Turkish tea from Turkey. That is pretty cool. So now I can bring comments on the screen. And guess why? Because today is a live Q&A, so it's your questions I'm going to answer in real time. And as someone on Twitter mentioned, that's brave. So that's what's going to happen. And I think we're done with technical difficulties. Can everyone hear me out of both ears? We'll go with a maybe as I finish my tea. Yep, 2 years. I think we're in business. Only 8 minutes behind. So let's kick this off. But first, I'll put this on. So my name is Ariel, and for those of you who know me, you know that I write a lot about ASO. I talk a lot about ASO. I do a lot of stuff that revolves around ASO. For those who don't, I look at apps all day because I run App Figures, a platform that gives you pretty much everything you need to be competitive on the App Store and on Google Play these days, which includes analytics and App Store optimization tools and competitive intelligence tools. And one of the things that I enjoy the most is showing developers and showing marketers, showing everyone who needs these sort of tools how to use them. And it's a very interesting feedback loop because the more I show them, the more I understand how the platform should be, so it's easier, and that's why it's so much fun. So I write a newsletter every week where I do keyword teardowns. I look at different results on the App Store, and I try to analyze why the algorithm picked those results. And it's usually one of two things: keyword placement and ratings. And I also write another newsletter where I look at the industry for trends, and I find trends in apps and games, and I do that every Friday. So I look at a lot of apps. I talk a lot about apps, and one of the things that I get all the time are questions about App Store optimization. And that's why this live stream is not really about a topic, but specifically about answering questions, which I get all the time. So I want to open it up to everyone, and I want to hear what you are thinking about when it comes to ASO. This is a new year. iOS 15 shipped not too long ago, and it brought with it a bunch of changes. I'm sure you're trying to keep up with them. So ask me your bestest of questions, and I will do my best to answer them. And if necessary, I have my tools here with me. This is the App Figures platform for those of you who are not familiar. And there are a bunch of tools here, but this is the one I like the most, Keyword Inspector. It will give us pretty much everything we need for a quick analysis. So if we need it, it's here. Let's turn to questions. So bring me your questions. I'll put them on the screen, and we'll go from there. And for now, I'll drink me some coffee. And tea. And by the way, I guess before we even stream into questions, one of the most important questions, or a question that I even got this morning, and I get this all the time, is whether the algorithm, and specifically Apple's algorithm, cares about downloads for apps or cares about anything else. And the answer is it cares less about downloads, if at all. From my experience, it's possible that it does, and I just don't know about it, but I've looked at thousands of keywords. And so one of the things that I always tell developers is focus on turning all of your users, whether it's new users that just downloaded the app or existing users, always make sure they rate the app, because ratings are the way in which you will get more ranks or better ranks. And the reason for that is actually, if you think about it from a technical standpoint, if you are Apple and you want to make sure that you're always floating new apps, or you're giving some you're refreshing the results fairly often, you don't want to rely on downloads, because higher ranks give you more downloads, so the app that will be at the top will just continue to dominate the top. And that's why I'm pretty sure that downloads are not a major factor in ranks, because it will create this self-feeding loop kind of that will never end. And Apple doesn't really want to do that. So if that was a question in someone's mind, that's that. And I see a lot of questions, so let's get started. So now that I have this, I can bring it up on the screen like this. Oh, and it looks kind of strange. I guess this is a very long question. Does searching for a keyword in App Store causes some kind of recalculation of rank? Notice after I search for some of my low traffic keywords, ranks sometimes change the next day. So that's very interesting. I don't think that for real keywords or for popular keywords, this could be a factor, because if you're thinking about a keyword with a popularity that's really anything more than a 5 or a 6 or a 7, it's probably getting many thousands of searches every day. So another one, not going to rock the boat that much. But then if you're thinking about a keyword that gets 2 or 3 searches a day, another search could do something about it and could wake up the algorithm to try and figure out, oh, hey, are these results the best results? Now, does that mean that it's a good thing? I don't think so. If you can influence your search results with a single search, that probably means no one else cares about this. So I would say move on to yet a different keyword or a different set of keywords where you can't influence the results, because they're probably a little bit better, or a little bit better for downloads, because that's what we care about. So that's an interesting question. I don't think I've heard this one before. Continuing, I'm gonna try going in order, and as much as I can. If need be, I'll skip a few just so I can get to the better ones. But can keyword, let's see this. Laura's asking, can keyword density of the store listing long description still be a ranking factor? Keyword density of the store listing long description still be a ranking factor. So this is talking about Google Play, because Google Play actually cares about the description, which we call long description in this case. And I think the density is important. I think there is still a lot that Google puts on it, a lot of emphasis, because it doesn't have that keyword list that Apple does. And because Google is really good at reading stuff and understanding it. And that's a really good place to use it. We're actually coming out with a keyword density tool, a smart keyword density tool, to help you make sure that you're doing density right and that you're using the proper keywords. And Google gets a lot more complicated about, it's not just about density or repetition. It's really about alternatives and how you use them. So there are a lot of little nuances that go into the description. It's not as straightforward as it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But I think so. I'm pretty sure that density is still a very important factor. Now, on the Apple side, density is not a factor at all, because the description is not being parsed at all. And maybe that's something that's going to change in the future. I think that's really hard to tell at this point, but for now, it's not a ranking factor at all from what I've seen. So that's keyword density. I really need to move my comment somewhere else. Ooh, Franklin is asking, what do you think about Apple's product page optimization? So I wrote about it immediately when I heard about it, when I saw the session at WWDC, and I think this is going to be a game changer. I interviewed a few people who run A/B tests professionally for big companies here on the live stream before it was on YouTube back in the day, although those videos are still on YouTube, and everyone is excited about them. I think the idea that we'll have access to some way of changing our App Store Connect pages is just mind-boggling. It's just like craziness, and I want to do it. But if you have been, or what I've been hearing over the last few days is that they're completely broken, because now they're available, and almost every developer that used them so far says that something is going wrong. Either the screenshots get jumbled in App Store Connect, or the results are incorrect. So I think it's going to take some time until they actually start working. But once they do, I think this is a superpower. I think if you're not using this, it's a problem. And I love running A/B tests. I think in previous live streams, I said that I run an A/B test for every email that I send, which is still true. Every email that goes out has its subject A/B tested before the actual send. And we do a lot of A/B testing on a site. We do a lot of A/B testing wherever we can, because it's kind of like I think I'm right when I write tests and stuff. When I write subject lines, when I write header copy, when I do all those things, I always think I'm right, but I know I'm not all the time. So it's one of those things where I don't want to think that I'm right. I just want to have the thing that works for most users, that engages most users, and that's where A/B tests become really handy, and that's what we have to do on the App Store as well. So having access to that is great. Google has been allowing that for a while, and I know developers that have been using it, and I've used it. And I have helped developers use it in the past, and it's been nothing but helpful. It gave people the ability to see beyond what they think is right. And I think that's just incredible. That's the kind of thing that we, again, have to do at all times. It's kind of a pain with icons, because you have to update your bundle every time, or you have to update your binary. But if you're not testing icons, if you're only testing screenshots, you should be fine. And that should not be an issue. So what I think about them is they're amazing, or they will be amazing. And if you can use them, and if you can't, figure out how you can. That's my way of looking at it. Let's see what's next. Are there any backlink practices that can? Oh, Laura is continuing to ask about Google Play. Are there any backlink practices that can help an app to rank higher in its category? The answer is yes, and it's pretty complicated, but Google, because it's so good at doing backlinks from Google search engine, the regular Google search for web, it brought that also into Google Play. And I don't think there are any, it's not really too complicated. It's very similar to search engine optimization. I should probably write a guide about it at some point. But the idea is, just like search engine optimization, when you're pointing users, when you're pointing anyone into Google Play, into your apps page on Google Play, that link gets recorded. And so Google knows where it came from. They also know, in some cases, the text of the link, because they also scan all the websites in the world pretty much. So they know what a user clicked on to get to your Google Play link. And that gives it this insight into what people are searching or what people are using to get to you and how people think about your app. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that links that are pointing to your Google Play store page have keywords that are relevant for your app. So if your app has to do with sleep tracking, and the link itself says sleep tracking or sleep tracking app or app for sleep tracking, something like that, that would make Google believe that your app has something to do with sleep tracking. And it knows that it has to do something with sleep tracking because those are probably the keywords you're using and the name of the app, and it's in the description. And so all those together will just be better. So that's kind of what you want to do when it comes to links. Now, it's not a straightforward thing. So if you just go and somehow plaster the web with a million links that have a keyword in them, Google's going to notice and they're not going to like it. It's probably going to hurt. But if you do it properly, just like search engine optimization, I think it will work well. And that's what we've been seeing with a lot of apps. And that's actually something I've been meaning to introduce into Inspector for the longest time. That's something, it's still a tool that we're building, because being able to see that will make a lot more sense on the Google Play side of things, which we don't have now, but we will. So that's that. Mike is asking irrelevant questions. How do all of your tips apply to Google Play? All teardowns appear to be Apple App Store. So Mike is very right. I've been focusing on the Apple App Store because what I do with the teardowns is, as I share more of these ideas and thoughts and really analyses, is I take that and I bring that to our product team so we can improve our platform. And I'm trying to do Apple, and then I'll do Google. We're working on some tools for Google, so as we roll those out, there will be more teardowns that have to do with Google. Kind of like what I was saying just a second ago about inbound links and stuff like that, because Google does things that are very different than Apple. In comparison, Apple is super simple, where Google is not super simple, maybe super complicated. And Google looks at some stuff that we can't even see, like crashes and some other stuff. So we still have to float as much information as we can and make sense of it and give you the tools to do it, and that's what we're working on. So as we do more of those, we'll launch more of those. I'll talk more about Google Play because the tools will help me understand what's going on. That's really my plan. We'll see how that goes. So stay tuned for Google Play. Ooh, interesting. A long question, but I think it makes sense. Is comma and title to separate brand name and keyword necessary? Can we use space instead of a comma? Reason that by using comma, Google Ads requires us to have an extra space. You don't have to use a comma. You can split it with whatever you want. Space is a proper splitter for pretty much anything, but it really depends on how you want people to read it, because ultimately people are also reading these things. So you can't just, I mean, you can, but you shouldn't just optimize for the algorithm, because even if you're number one and your name, your app's name looks like a bunch of keywords, it might just throw off some people or turn them off from downloading the app, and they'll move on to the next app. Now, I've looked at a bunch of, I've compared page views versus downloads for a bunch of categories actually last night. And it seems like in most cases that doesn't happen. So in most cases, when a user lands on a page, they'll usually download it after they come from search results. It doesn't stay the same for all categories, obviously, and it's not the same for all apps and for all keywords. But in general, you kind of want to make sure that when someone lands on your app, it turns into a download, because that's what happens. In games, it doesn't happen at all. In games, there's a lot more research. And I say research, but I mean just kind of shopping around, and because the keywords are generic. But I'm off topic here. I'll go back to questions. Jordy is asking, does the rank go up if people search for a keyword and then download your app from that keyword? So In general, I think because of the way Apple does privacy and because of the way that Apple does analytics around apps, I believe that it's not exactly the case. So I believe that if they take it into consideration, if they take that conversion rate into consideration, it's less of a consideration. Although in the last live stream, we had someone who mentioned that that is a big thing. And so it's very possible that's becoming now more of an important factor with iOS 15 or in general as Apple's tweaking its algorithm. On Google Play, it definitely helps. On Google Play, it's actually, if you don't get that, I think you get penalized, and it's the same after the download. If a download happens, but then it gets uninstalled or deleted, they penalize you in search results as well. Same for crashes. Same for really anything that indicates to the algorithm that the person downloaded your app but really don't want it or can't use it. So in Google Play, it's very important, and you have to make sure that you're getting that initial retention and you're getting that conversion. And that's where A/B tests come in and product pages. So do all those. Okay, so this is a very general question, and I get this more often than I think. I even remember. How much does how much your downloads impact keyword ranks? And that's what I was saying just before when we started the live stream. I'm pretty sure they don't. Maybe there's a tiny bit because the algorithm tries to read as much as it can for situations where the big strong signals are not available or are too similar. But if you really look at really any search for any keyword in the App Store or even on Google Play, you will see that the sorting is not by downloads. And you'll see that the sorting is more often by ratings, almost always. It's a combination of ratings and keyword placement, of course, but it's not downloads. So downloads don't really impact ranks for the most part. There might be a situation where everything else is exactly identical, and then the algorithm will need something else to reference, and the ages of the apps are the same, the ranks are the same, the ratings are the same, and then maybe it will fail over to something like that. I've not seen many keywords where that is even remotely close to happening. And if you have, drop a comment and let me know. And there's so many comments, so maybe I will get to it at some point. I gotta move a little bit more quickly. Vlad is asking if the number of reviews is treated at the worldwide level or country level. And the quick answer for Apple is at the country level. Google doesn't really do ratings by country. They kind of they're trying to do now, and they broke all of Google Play in the process. But I believe on Google Play, it's still worldwide. On the Apple App Store side, it's at the country level. And maybe a follow-up question that might be in the chat, but I haven't seen it yet, is whether it's about positive ratings or negative ratings. And from everything I've seen, it all indicates that it's about ratings. Positive and negative. And I have a feeling that Apple's using ratings as a mean for understanding engagement as opposed to understanding quality. And that's why we're seeing that happen. So that's that. Newbie here. Hello, Newbie. App went live mid-December. Best practices on promotional IAP offers, consumer subscription. Promotional IAP offers, just do them. That's my easiest tip to give you. I've written a lot about how promoting an in-app purchase, especially a subscription, is helpful for App Store optimization. If anything, it actually takes up another space in the results, so you get 2 spaces as opposed to 1. So 1 less competitor, but it also gives you a little bit of a boost from what I've seen. I heard from some developers that this is more helpful when you have a subscription as opposed to when you have just a regular old in-app purchase, a consumable in-app purchase. But I've not seen too much of that myself, so I don't know how true that is or if it's specific to some categories and not all categories. But promote it. That would be my tip. A question from Ram. Is it a good idea to leave the keywords field half empty in App Store Connect if you want to improve the weight assigned to the keywords? Whew, that is a very interesting question. So if you have been reading my keyword teardowns, you know that I talk a lot about focus. And focus means that the less information you feed the algorithm, the more weight it puts on what you give it. So if you're allowed to use 30 characters, and 30 characters are, let's say, 100% for the name, then every character is really 30 divided by 100, or 100 divided by 30. But the less characters, it means that each character gets more weight. In real life, it's more about words than characters, but hopefully you get the idea. So you can do the same thing in the name, the subtitle, and the keyword list. And I have even shown instances in which only having 1 or 2 words in the app's name really help. Really help focus on a specific keyword. So the same applies to the keyword list. There's really no reason why that would not be the case. But keep a few things in mind. One is that the keyword list is not really all that significant in terms of weight. And so what you put there, especially if it's at the end or at the end of the half, it's not going to get all that much, but it's not going to get much. So you could use it, but the results I think are going to be kind of weak. So if you want to use some sort of focus, use it at the name and then continue to the subtitle. I would even suggest doing it just at the name level. But I would recommend ordering your keyword list the way you want it to. Because again, it's not going to be that much weight that's going to be spread around, but the benefit is that all those words, if you've been doing it correctly, will combine with whatever you're focusing on in the name. So then you will have a half that gets a ton of weight, and then the other half that gets a little weight, but at least that's something. So, and that's how some apps are able to target the long tail of, let's say, a good keyword that's a long tail. So something that's really popular, but with a few modifiers. And that's how you can rank without even having it in the name or subtitle. So you can focus everything on the name, which is the strategy I would use in some cases, and I have used in some cases very successfully. Also, I have to add, this is not really questions related, but this week I got a bunch of emails from people who were saying that they have been trying some of the tips that I have been recommending over the last few months, and in combination with the tools that we offer through AppFigures, they've been able to get amazing results. I saw some on Twitter, some people have been emailing me. This is pretty awesome, and I want to thank everyone who's done that. If you're in the crowd, thank you. If you're not, I'll see you hopefully next time. But that helps me a lot because it gives me all continued reason to do more of these. And it also shows me that we're on the right track with the tools as we continue to improve them. So thank you. That was just that. Next, another question from Laura. Does Google consider the content freshness of the store listing, copies, screenshots, videos, etc., as a significant factor to suggest an app in its category? So that's a great question, and I believe the answer to that is not a no, but it's not a hard yes. There are many factors that it considers before it considers freshness on the App Store, but that does go into consideration, I'm pretty sure. And we see that actually on the App Store as well. Fresher apps do tend to get a little bit more weight. But then again, if you think about the weight as kind of a big scale, it's on the bottom of things that I think can contribute to your app's rank on Google Play. So you want to make sure that your app doesn't crash. You want to make sure that those users who are seeing your app are converting. You want to make sure that you have those new ratings to indicate that the app is being used. And once you have that, you will start to see more traffic going your way. Another question, how to encourage app ratings. I have a whole guide on app ratings and what you should do and how you can implement them. So I'll try to post that in the chat very soon, or really after we're done. But if not, head into appfigures.com/resources and go into the guide section, and you'll see a guide just on ratings. In general, all you have to do is ask. We've seen that apps that ask for a rating with the pop-up on Google Play or on the App Store, iOS or Android, have gotten about a 4x increase in number of new ratings just by asking. So even if you don't do it really well, even if you don't ask at the amazingly appropriate time, you will still get an increase. And then you can go and tweak that and find the right time to ask people for a rating so you can convert them really the best. So that's that. I believe this is a part of this is a continuation of the question about a comma. So we answer that. I think we should be good. And he is asking, our store performance has been improving, but our category ranking isn't budging. Do you have any suggestions on how we can change that? So what I was saying before about downloads and how downloads don't impact keyword ranks, the flip is flip it for category ranks. Category ranks are really all about downloads, mostly all about downloads. There are a few other factors, but it's really about downloads. So for those, you just have to have more downloads than the apps above you. And if you don't, that's not going to happen. So do more ASO, push the app a little bit more, and that's how you're going to increase in ranks. But in category ranks, the thing about category ranks, though, is that I think they are not as useful as they used to be maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because both App Store and Google Play have really moved away from just lists and now are doing more of the curated aspect of it. And even to open up a list takes a whole bunch of taps, and I kind of feel like most people don't do it. So that's a little bit different, and you should still aim to be the number one or as high up as you can, because that doesn't hurt for sure. But I would put less emphasis on that and more emphasis on discovery, and discovery happens through search and also through something like getting featured. And both Apple and Google have kind of a process at this point to feature apps that you can request to get featured, and you can give them and share your story and really sell them on why you should feature my app. And I think that's going to give you a lot more mileage than trying to rank in your category at this point in 2022. Like I said, 5 or 6 years ago, that was not the case. But because of all those redesigns, that's getting a lot more emphasis. Continuing, let's see. Patrick is saying, when you talk about keywords, do you mean the keywords I have to my version information for my app, or do you mean the keywords to use in the App Store text? I am not 100% what that means, but I think both. So the keywords that I'm talking about, you have keywords in the app's name from the metadata, the app's subtitle, that's what you see on the App Store, and inside of App Store Connect, you also get a list for keywords. That is a tiny text box that does not feel like it should be a list of keywords, but that's what it is. So I'm talking about all of those, and all of those should contain keywords. Now, I know some people are purists and they say we can't have keywords in our name, but at the same time, if your app's name doesn't really say what the app does, and I'm a user and I'm only reading the app's name, I'm not going to download it if I don't know what it does. So the keywords are not just for the algorithm, they're also for humans. Hopefully that was helpful. Annie is asking, when launching a new app on Google Play, what are the suggestions for keywords? We tried using different keywords, but we're not getting ranked for any of them. So this is actually an interesting one, because while Apple changes very often and the changes get applied very often, and the re-indexing, meaning that the algorithm can see those new keywords that you're using, all that happens really fast. And when people ask me how long they should wait to see results, just a few weeks and you should have your results. On Google Play, that's not the case. Google Play is much slower, not because it updates more slowly, is because it cares about trends over time. And so when you're just starting out, you don't have trends. And that's why you're not getting ranked immediately. I don't know if that's on purpose, and that's how Google wants this to happen. They want to kind of demote apps that are brand new because they don't know if they're good or bad, and they don't want to incentivize users to download them or really float them to the top. But what I would do is I would focus on the right keywords when you begin, and it will take a little bit of time until you build that momentum. And during that time, I would suggest doing something else, some other promotional activity. There are free ones, there are paid ones, so you can choose from a variety. But for ASO and Google Play, it will take some time until things really kick in. But once they do, then everything else will make sense. Patrick is saying, I have the #1 app in Sweden for paid apps. Can you help me live with my keywords? I probably can, but there's so many questions that I want to get back to that if we have time, we'll take a look at those. I promise. If it's a big if, because I'm looking at the time and I don't know if we'll have it. But if not, send me an email later, or hit me up on Twitter and send me the keywords that you're #1 in, and I'll take a look. I love taking a look at these things, especially at keywords outside the US. I don't get to do a lot of that for the keyword teardowns because the US is kind of the biggest place, and that's where everyone wants to rank. So share them with me on email or on Twitter, and I'll do my best to help. A question from Rafael. Do the text and screenshots impact ASO results? Should we consider the best tags there as well? Tricky question. So my inclination is to say absolutely not. And then a few videos ago, someone left a comment on the video saying that they do, and they were told by Apple that they do. I forgot exactly which video, but it's on our YouTube somewhere. And I want to believe it, because Apple has been doing a lot of stuff with text, with OCR, with text on images. And if you've tried, I forgot what it's called, the little feature in the Photos app that takes pictures and turns text into real text, it's magical. It just works. It's amazing. So in theory, they have the tools to do it. And now we even know that they have the tools to do it. I have not, however, seen that in the wild. I've been looking for it ever since I saw that comment on the video, and I have not seen it actually be a real thing. So maybe that's going to happen at some point. Maybe not. Maybe it's one of those things that Apple will eventually do and they really want to, but they're not at the moment. I don't exactly know. I would say, though, and if you've read any of the app teardowns that I've done in the past, you know that when users are looking at this, if the keyword is what they're searching, seeing it on the screenshot is probably a benefit. So it will reinforce that your app does what they want. So if you go back to that sleep tracking example that I had before, if you're looking for sleep tracking and then you see a set of screenshots, none of them mentioning sleep tracking, you might not immediately or intuitively realize that this is the app for you. But if it says sleep tracking, it will just reinforce that I want this says this, download, get. So I would recommend using those keywords because they show intent and because it's what your users are looking for. And if Apple can read them, even better. Win-win, the way I see it. Question from Laura. Does the short description have a direct connection with the Google Explore traffic? I believe the short description, which is kind of Google's version of the subtitle, but it's just longer, I believe it does have a connection with traffic in general. Those things are a little bit more tricky to estimate, so I don't know exactly, and I think it would depend on the keyword and the set of competitors and what sort of data they have. But it can't, if you think about it, it has to. So that's that. Steven is saying, I've tried ranking for some keywords and didn't have success. What is the lower rank position you would keep targeting versus abandon and try for other keywords? I always look at top 5 or top 10, and that's for a reason. From everything that I've seen, especially when you look at page view data, you can see that up until 5, you still have some variety in terms of good return on investment or good conversion rate. And then below 5, it becomes really murky. And so 1 to 10 would be kind of my absolute list. It changes depending on the keyword, and in some keywords, you can see that below 3, no one will care because the top 3 results are just so intuitively right that no one's going to look even more. And in some keywords, you can see that the top 10 are actually all very much similar, and they have similar performance, and they look good. And so that's why it really depends on the keyword. But for me, it's between 1 and 5 or 1 and 10. If we can't crack the top 10, then we definitely know we're not doing it right. If we can't crack the top 5, then we know that we need to try harder. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And on Apple specifically, because the changes happen so quickly, a few weeks, and you know definitively if you're going to be able to do it or not, you can experiment. So I would say abandon fast. And until you can get into the top 10, 7, 8, that area, from that point, you can push more. But it also depends where you came from. So if your app was below 100 and then overnight from one change jumped to 30, you're probably on the right track. Keep pushing. And then if that doesn't work, try to think about a modifier or a long tail or something that would be relevant and similar, but not exactly the same or has slightly lower popularity. I actually did a teardown on this a few weeks ago where we looked at just changing a few characters in a word. So I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was tracker versus tracking. So those little changes actually make a big difference when it comes to popularity. And then you can aim for something that is almost exactly the same, slightly less popular, and you can use that to gain that momentum and then go and target the bigger keyword. So that would be how I would do it. Let's see what else we have here. Wow, a lot of questions. Okay, continuing. I see some questions that are repeats. We're going to skip those. And more questions that are repeats. We'll skip those as well. Ooh, interesting one. So during the Epic trial, it was said that Apple boosted one of their apps for ranks and forgot to remove it later. Forgot. Do you think they do it for third-party apps in good standing with them? I don't think they do it for third-party apps because they know that at some point, some third-party app will actually try to show off with it. And I think that would be a problem. So I'm pretty sure they don't. Now, if you've been reading the keyword teardowns, you know that every time I touch on a keyword that happens to be associated with Apple, so something like notes or podcast or news, Apple's apps are always at the top, or were always at the top up until not too long ago. And there's something, I think, going on where Apple knows that either it's number 1 or number 5. but it's never anywhere else, and it's always for one specific, the generic keyword, and you won't find it in any of the different types of keywords. So if we look at something like a podcast, so they would be number 1 for podcast or number 5 for podcast, depends on, I guess, where they decided they want to be. But if you look for podcast player or podcast playlist or any of those other types of podcasts, you won't find them at all, or you'll find them very, very low on the list. So it's kind of like they're modifying, they're hard coding their app for a specific keyword, and it's definitely not organic. I can say that for a fact because I've looked at enough keywords, especially enough Apple keywords. And at this point, what I do is I actually ignore the Apple keywords when I do the teardowns because they don't really give us anything useful. But back to your question, I don't think they do it for any developers. I think they do it just for themselves because it's easier and they like it. That's my guess. Whoa, that was fun. Let's see. More. Ooh, an interesting one. What is the effect of the velocity of the third-party paid traffic in Google Play on the overall ranking of the app in the category? So, just like I was saying before about ranks in the category, categories are all about, or most about downloads. So I don't think, that will have an impact on downloads and that will have an impact on your category rank. So that's how that works. It's all about the downloads. If they happen, then you will see the impact on category ranks. But in general, the impact on keyword ranks is not as pronounced, not at all obvious, unless you do a really good job at converting those downloads, those paid downloads, into ratings. And the apps that are buying traffic, or the apps that are advertising heavily and are converting those into ratings, those are the apps that succeed in keyword ranks, not because they're buying traffic, but because they are maximizing really their return on investment. The real problem is when you run paid ads, the conversion rate from a user to, or the retention rate and the engagement rate are much lower than you get when they just find you on the App Store on Google Play. And so you can't really imagine that every paid download will convert to a rating at the same rate that every organic download will convert into a rating. And that's when you end up seeing that you need much larger numbers. So if that's a strategy that you have, that's what you would have to do. Let's see what else we got. Ooh, a lot of repeats. Very easy one. Is there a Google Play equivalent to the keyword list? And the answer is no, but there is a long description, and Google extracts a keyword list from that long description. And I believe I have a guide on that also somewhere in our resources and our guide section. So if I find that, I'll share that as well. But you have to build the description properly to give Google that keyword list, basically. Good question from Vlad. If you remove a keyword from the title that you are very well ranked, does the app lose the rank? Yes, of course it does. Now, the algorithm remembers, so it could keep you there for a little bit, or it will keep you there if there's no competition or very weak competition. But if there's any sort of real competition, they're going to get ranked after you remove that keyword. And I would not recommend doing that, obviously, but you can, in theory, regain the rank. It's not going to be as easy. So if you were ranked really well for a keyword and then you drop it for whatever reason, and I've seen that happen a lot with issues with localizations in other countries, just messing up localizations and everything else gets messed up. And there's just no easy way to tell you the algorithm, just kidding, undo. So make sure you don't do that. And if you do, just be ready to wait a little bit until it captures that sort of momentum again. And that momentum will give you the ability to rank in it again. Next up. Ooh, I do see guides in the chat. Thank you, Frank. Wow, there are a lot of interesting questions here. Also a lot of repeats. So I'm glad I answered multiple questions at once. Whew. Okay, another good question from Ram. Thank you, Ram, for all the good questions. Most of ASO advice is to achieve a goal. Once you've achieved your goals, what are you supposed to do next? I think you're looking at it the wrong way. So most of the ASO advice is to continue and achieve a goal or work towards a goal. But your real goal with your app is to get more downloads. It's not to get some number of downloads. And if it is, then, it is what it is. I don't know many developers that have a set number in mind. But when I think about doing this, I think about, I want to get more downloads. And when I get, more downloads, whatever that number is, I want to multiply my downloads by 2. Then I want to do it again. And so it's always about a race towards the next opportunity. And unless you're Instagram, which has a popularity of 100, I think all of your keywords are going to be the ones that keep on changing. So you always have this sort of ladder to climb up and get more and more and more downloads to the point where eventually you will have all the downloads. But until then, that's really the goal you're working towards. You're not working towards a specific keyword. You're working towards getting more downloads. Or at least that's how I look at it. That's how I would recommend looking at it. And that's how you get more done. Okay, interesting one. My app title repeats itself. It's kind of like run, run, workout. I know it's not optimal, but since it's so early in the title, is that fine? So yes and no and maybe. It kind of really depends. And I've covered a few instances where doing something like this is okay. One of those, I believe, is the weather channel. The weather channel has the weather in its name, and then it's also a weather app. So they use that twice. If that's your entire title, or that's your entire app name, run, run, workout, then run and run would cancel out basically, and then you just have run, workout. And I believe that's okay. That's not terrible because you don't have anything else going on that would make this really bad. And so that kind of makes sense to me. The question is, if it's a part of a brand, then you definitely want to have it because you want to have that sort of visibility. If it's just for some other reason, technical reason, then I don't think it's really worth it. But then again, if it's all about the brand, this is not going to be terrible. And if you make sure that your keyword list and your subtitle, your long description, your short description are actually very aligned, it'll all make sense with this. Let's see what else. Is it okay to use special characters in app titles or subtitles on the App Store? Absolutely. There really shouldn't be any reason not to. But I've noticed a few interesting cases where some characters are counted as more than just the one character we think they count as. And in some cases, they make especially if you use all 30 characters on the App Store, for example, they make it so that your name gets cut the way the algorithm sees it. And then if you have a keyword, if you have a word at the end that you want to rank for, it will cut off potentially 1 or 2 characters out of it, and you're not going to rank for it. And it's all invisible, and none of this is documented. So it's all a bunch of guesses kind of multiplied by many, many things that I've seen. And I don't really have a definitive guide to what not to put. But if you are using special characters, I would say be mindful of that and don't aim for 30 characters, aim for many, many less. I would double. So maybe go for a half or go for 20 characters just to be on the safe side. And I could be completely wrong on this because, again, it's not documented and it's completely invisible to humans. But that's just kind of what I've seen looking at enough keywords and enough apps that enough keywords where the resulting apps just don't make sense for some reason. And then you start dropping characters one by one and you see that makes sense. I believe I've seen it with the recipe apps, and I did a keyword teardown for recipes, I want to say a few months ago. So if you look at that or one of those keywords. But yeah, that's what I've seen, and that, again, is only my observation. Ooh, easy one. Does revenue affect the ranking in any of the stores? No. And the reason I can definitively say no is because a lot of apps are free, and if that was the case, they would not rank very well. And they would not rank very well when competing with apps that are not free in the same keyword or same category. And you can see that in something like the video editor category, and you can see that in pretty much every category at that point. So no. Now, again, going back to that featured in-app purchase, especially a subscription, if you do that, you're going to get a little bit of a bump. I have a feeling it has nothing to do with revenue. It has everything to do with Apple wanting to show off Apple features. And one of the Apple features that developers have access to is the ability to feature in-app purchases. So that will eventually go away, this sort of little bump or a little boost, and instead you'll get nothing from doing this. And I think I mentioned that a few weeks ago, but for now it seems to work, so use it. A long question from Laura. When competitors make no major changes in their store listing and stay in the same rank position in your category for a long period, what can be the reason to keep the position? Easy, I think it's their performance. So they may not make any changes to the page itself, but the ratings are still up and everything else, the keywords and the way their place is still right. So as long as that's still right, there's no reason for the algorithm to re-index them out, whether it's on Google Play and on Apple. And on Google Play, because they're looking at longer term trends, as long as the trend is consistent, hopefully positive, there's really no reason to make changes to those results if you look at it. Patrick is asking, how do I get AppFigures merch? I imagine something like this. You subscribe to our newsletter. We have a Friday newsletter where I talk about trends, and if you refer people to that newsletter, you can get this. You can get this mug. Actually, we ran out of this mug, so you can get a different mug that we will be putting out very soon, but we got stickers, we got this AppFigures shirt. We have a whole bunch of things, so go subscribe. It's appfigures.com/newsletter, and then tell all your friends about it because the insights are great, and I write them. So win-win. And then you do that enough times, and you will get merchandise from AppFigures. Maybe one day we'll also open a merch store. I don't know. I did not promise anything, so don't hold me to that. Another question from Patrick. Is the promotional text in App Store doing anything for ranking? And the answer is no. Apple specifically says that it doesn't. So if you are trying to use it to rank, it's not going to do much. But it's also one of those things that you can change without a version update. And so while it doesn't do anything for ranks, it could potentially maybe help with conversion. It's a long shot because a lot of people don't read. They go after the screenshots and they look at the icon, the name, the screenshots, and that's what they use to make their decision. But in case they read, you can try to use that to convert. Not for ranks, but maybe to help people. It really depends on how the app is. Another repeat, but I feel like I have to repeat this as much as possible. Downloads or ratings? Ratings. And I explained why multiple times, but it's really all about ratings. And if you go through some of the keyword teardowns, really any of the keyword teardowns, you'll see that in action. And you'll see, or even if you head right now into Keyword Inspector and type in really any keyword, you'll most likely see that with apps that use the keywords properly are sorted almost perfectly by their new ratings. So, ratings. Ooh, interesting. So, is there any symbiosis between App Store and metadata, title, subtitle keywords, and search ads keywords performance? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes because search ads try to figure out if an app is relevant for a keyword that it's trying to bid on or a keyword that it's already bidding on. So it's not just if you throw money on Apple search ads, it's the app also has to align with it. And I tried that. I used a bunch of keywords that don't align at all with our app and threw a bunch of money on Apple, and none of them ranked. None of them that are actually popular ranked. And so your app also has to be relevant according to Apple to the keyword that you want to show it in. And that's why you don't see a lot of search results where the apps aren't really related and they're completely different. You can see that a lot more on something like Google Play, or you can see that on Google in general with ads, but you don't see that on the App Store, and I think that's why. So you do want to keep some alignment. Now, the alignment is very loose, so it doesn't have to be, we're not optimizing for the search ads algorithm in any way, shape, or form. They just have to be loosely correlated, and then you'll be fine. A question from Ron. Is it okay to use competitor keywords in keyword list? In all my app teardowns that I've done, the answer was always no, except for maybe one or two cases. So I would say, no, don't do it. The other thing about it is that Apple will shoot your app down very quickly if it uses someone else's name and that name is trademarked in any way. And trademarks are kind of loose as well when it comes to that. So if you want to be safe, don't do it. I also think that if you think about intentions and if you think about why someone would search for a specific keyword, if they're looking for a competitor by name, which is where you're trying to show up, they're not going to download your app. They're going to download that competitor because that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for an app that does X and has that name. They're looking for that competitor. There's maybe one or two situations where I've seen it could work, maybe, and that's a huge maybe, and I would not recommend doing that because it's a waste of characters. And that's in something that's really generic. So something like food delivery, for example. Uber Eats and DoorDash and all those, they're kind of synonymous. Ultimately, the same people kind of end up working for all of them. So if you're thinking about food delivery, you just care about the food. You might look for an app by name, but you really care about the food that you're going to buy. So that's maybe an area where I would look at, where I would even consider, but no, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it at any point. It's just wasteful. The alternative is to always find the stuff that people are actually looking for. So find the intent, find what they want to get from that competitor, optimize for that. And that's going to be your winning strategy in at least 95% of cases. And I'm only saying 95 because I can think of other cases, but I can't think of how many. Maybe it's 98%. Maybe it's 99%, but it's more than a lot. And we're running low on time, so I'm going to take a few last questions. And then, like I was saying to Patrick before, if you have any more questions, feel free to message me on Twitter, send me an email. I'll try to get back to you as fast as I can so we can continue there. Let's see, what else do we have? Do recent updates, do long description experiments. No major updates. How long is the time frame for considering reviews? So Vlad is asking, how long is the time frame for considering reviews on Google and Apple? And mostly I'm talking about ratings when I talk about those counts, not reviews, even though reviews come with ratings. But it's kind of tough to say. Apple has a very short window, which is somewhere in the week to a month territory. I've seen it stretch a little bit longer. But when I look at them, I look at the trend over 30 days, and usually that trend tells the entire story, especially if it's going up towards the end or if it's declining since the beginning. And you can kind of quickly see how that relates to results if you head into Inspector, for example, and look at that. But generally on Google, it's a lot longer, and I've seen it even being mentioned in terms of months, 30, 60, 90 days. So you want to look at a slightly longer trend. Ultimately, it's about the direction of the trend, so you want to keep it up. And as long as it's up, it's fine. But I've also seen instances where if you only have a spike, it's not going to get treated as a trend, but it's going to get treated more of as an anomaly. So if you're thinking, let me just go buy some ratings for 1 or 2 days, and then I will impact my trend considerably, I don't think that's going to work as well. And I don't think you should buy ratings in general, but I've seen a lot of discussion around that and how that can improve ranks. And even though it can, it won't give you results. That's really the ultimate takeaway from this. So hopefully I answered the question and then some. Another question, do you recommend creating app preview videos for better conversion rates? I tried to answer that in app teardowns, and I've done a whole bunch. And on the App Store, you see very few apps that have preview videos. I think that if you have the ability to produce a video, you should, because it's just a great user experience. I, as a user, when I just see stuff and it starts moving on its own, and it takes me through what the app does. So basically, the way the screenshots are laid out, if you follow best practices and you're telling a story with them, if you do that in the video, it's going to be great. But if you don't do it, I don't think you're going to get in any way penalized. Apple is really super specific about what you can and can't do in videos. And I've seen some videos get away with almost full-on marketing videos. They just did it really well by integrating the UI with callouts as opposed to just doing callouts. And I've seen and I've heard from other developers that said that Apple had them either remove the preview or not approve their version update because it felt a little bit too markety. So it's kind of a pain. I think Apple made it so strict that many developers are trying not to do it. Also, producing videos, especially high-quality videos, is not the kind of thing that you just make happen overnight unless you have that sort of skill set or you have someone that has that sort of skill set that you can use, whether it's an agency or someone else. But if you have the ability, I don't see any reason not to do it. I think it's one of those things that can really, really help with the UI. And we see a lot more of that on Google because there are not that many kind of weird limitations. I think the last question, because we're kind of officially out of time, but let's see. You said Apple will will shoot you down if you have a trademark term in your keyword list. Are you saying your app would be rejected at review or just penalized your rating? So from what I have seen, Apple will reject you at review and also could threat to just pull your app from the store until you fix the keyword list. And that depends on whether they discovered the trademark during a review or if someone brought a case against you. And I know that we have a tool called Explorer, and many companies use it to make sure no one else is using their keywords in the name and in the description. And then we have companies that use Inspector to make sure that they're not using it in the keyword list. And I know that in most of those cases, the developers that I've talked to who do this actively and have a trademark and they're protecting it get results pretty immediately. So if they contact Apple and say, hey, this app is using my trademark, here is my trademark, and here's how I can prove it's my trademark, the apps will get shut down pretty quickly. Not even within months, which is what I would have expected from Apple, but days if not weeks, or weeks if not days. So so they can pull your app from the store. I don't think it has any relevance on ranks, though. So if you manage to squeeze by or to slip by and have some sort of a competitor's name, and the competitor has not brought any rejection against you, then you'll probably get away with it, and then you'll rank for it. But then going back to what I was saying before, even if you rank for it, I don't think it's going to give you any real benefit, especially not a long-term one, the one that you can build on. So that's kind of my reasoning for why you shouldn't do it. One, you can get your app pulled. Two, you can get you won't really get that many downloads out of it. And kind of even worse, especially on Google Play, if people think by some weird reason that your app is the app they were looking for and it's not, they will just uninstall it immediately. Worse, they will leave a negative review. And so you don't get to win from this. I think it's a lose-lose the way I see it. So again, I would not recommend doing this. Let's see. What else do we have? What else do we have? I guess last question, because this is an interesting one that I like. Does the App Store do any word stemming? For example, is tracking and track considered two different words? Should we avoid duplicating similar words with the same root? The answer is no, not really. The algorithm is not really that smart, I would say, or that intelligent. So track and tracking, like I was saying before, they actually, if you look at keywords that are relevant for track and tracking, time tracking and time track and time tracker or track time, they all have different popularity scores. So you know that the algorithm is considering them as standalone keywords. The only thing that I've seen that it actually does is it knows about plural. So if you have track and tracks, for example, those would be the same, and you don't really need to optimize for both. The interesting thing is they could have different popularity scores even though the algorithm sees you for both. I would say in that case, always optimize for what sounds the best, what makes sense, because again, users are reading it. So it's all about that. And I think that's really all the time we have. We're only behind by 5 minutes. So I'm going to trim it here and say thank you for joining. This was great. I'm going to do this again in just about a month. So if you have any good questions if you still have any questions, email me or find me on Twitter. But if you are learning now and reading now, in about a month, we'll do this again so you can bring all that learning and all those questions that will come out of it to next month's Q&A. And I would highly recommend that you subscribe to the channel to make sure that you're aware of new videos that we're putting out and that you know when we're going to do a new live stream. And I'll send you a bunch of emails, so you'll know about it anyway if you're subscribed. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. We're only behind by 6 minutes. I'm doing okay. If you have any feedback about the Q&A, if you have any questions, if you want to tell me what you think about the camera quality, find me on Twitter, send me an email. I would love to hear any and all feedback, and I will do my best to get back to all questions. If you've asked me a question before, you know that I will do it. You can also drop a question in a comment for this video, and I will get back to it as well. So really, any way of reaching me, I will do my best to respond. And that's pretty much all I got. Enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you're from, or evening, and I will see you again in just about a month. That's it for me.